Hi everyone and welcome to this new tutorial. Recently we are seeing more and more people using Twinmotion outside of architecture. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to have some content dedicated to these new use cases that emerge from the community. Today's tutorial will be dedicated to fashion and more precisely the footwear industry. And I'm going to show you the steps I follow to create this scene. So let's start with this new empty scene. The first thing I'm going to do is to actually import my shoe. This shoe, I found it on Sketchfab, and I'm going to import it as a uDatasmith file that I converted in 3ds Max. Going to select my shoe, click on Open. I will keep the hierarchy set up in my CAD software, and I'm going to click on Import. My shoe is there, probably just below the camera, as you can see here. For this type of render, I actually don't need that endless environment. So the first thing I'm going to do is to select my starting ground and I will delete it, pressing delete on my keyboard. Next thing I need to get rid of is that background. So I'm going to go to the settings, location, background, and here I'm just going to remove that background. Also, now what I don't need is that sky and that sharp line that you can see on the background created by the sky. For that, I'm going to simply load a backdrop. Going back to the import doc, clicking on import, and here I will load my geometry. My backdrop has been loaded. As you can see, it's just a simple wall with a bevel. What I want is to align that on the side of my shoe, so going to turn it 90 degrees like that. Also, I want that to be fully white, so I'm just simply picking the material using the material picker and I'm turning the color of my backdrop white. And also, as you can see here, my shoe is not really placed on top of that, so I'm just going to raise a bit my shoe up in the air. Also, a tiny detail, but right now inside Twinmotion, at the center of the world, we can see this small tiny hole. It's a little bug that will be fixed soon in an upcoming new patch. In the meantime, what I'm simply going to do is select my shoe, select my backdrop, and I'm simply going to move that a couple of centimeters up in the air. So this way, I'm not disturbed anymore by that hole. Next thing now is to set up the lighting. For this kind of render, I don't want a sky. I want to create some kind of photo studio type of setup. So the first thing I want to do is come to the lighting and remove completely the sun intensity. As you can see right now, it's fully black, and I will light that scene first with an HDRI. So I'm going to click on HDRI on the Sky Dome option that will load the basic native HDRI that come with Twinmotion. So that HDRI, if I'm looking up in the air, it's a sky, but it's not what I want. In that use case, I want a studio type of HDRI. So I'm going to the more, and here I can load my own HDRI. I found one online on the Grayscale Gorilla website, so let's load that one. So that one will indeed be perfect to enlight my shoe. Right now, I'm visualizing my shoe in real time using the raster mode inside Twinmotion. But what I want to do now is actually switch on the path tracer. The path tracer requires a dedicated hardware. If you want to learn more about the requirement of the path tracer, we have a dedicated page on our support website. To turn the path tracer on, I will simply click on the path tracer button that I have here. So the lighting is already pretty good. As you can see here now we have that nice contact shadow just beneath the shoe. But for my pack shot, what I want to have is a background fully white. So for that, the first thing I want to do is actually get rid of the auto exposure. Indeed, I want to manually control it. So I'm going to disable that. And right now, as you can see here, it's a bit too dark, so I'm going to raise the exposure manually, something like that. Not too big, because I also want to raise the luminosity created by the HDRI. So I will come back to my Sky Dome, and here I'm going to raise that intensity slider until I have something that's pretty much white on the background. Something like that. Here I can also play with the rotation of my HDRI to see how it affects my shoe. Now that's done, let's actually place down a camera. To do that, I will come to the media dock. Here we have all the media that you can export out of Twinmotion. I'm going to the image. I will click on the plus to create a new image, a new camera. And now let's customize it a bit. I will click on the more here to enter the properties of that image. And the first thing I want is actually to have a square ratio for that image. So I'm going to click on the format option. By default here we have two presets, 2K and 4K. But here what I'm going to do is click on the more and manually type the pixel resolution I want. And in that case I'm just going to tap the same height as the width. So you can see here I'm clipping through my floor over here and I'm seeing a bit my HDRI on the background. For that I'm just switching back to the camera control, and here I'm going to move the focal to something a bit smaller, like maybe 20. Moving the camera a bit back so we can see the whole object. Now that I've moved my camera, I need to press that refresh button to memorize the new camera position. So now that's done, let's maybe start to work a bit on the materials. Right now, indeed, we just have the basic material that came when I imported my object. And as you can see, they are pretty basic. So right now, all the material that you can find on Twinmotion are really dedicated to architecture. Anything from brick to concrete or glass. But as always, with Twinmotion, we want to give you all the creative freedom that you want. And for that, you can import your own materials. In my case, I found the materials also on the Grayscale Gorilla library. And I simply imported them and saved them inside my user library. So here I'm going to my user library, product viz, that's the folder I created, and here I just saved a couple of materials. Let's start by, for example, dragging that material, that fabric material onto my lace. Right now, the scale of that material is too big, so I'm just going to diminish the scale over here. Still too big, I can manually type a value that is below the minimum value of the slider. Something like that. And yeah, the next step will be just to drag and drop a couple of material onto my whole shoe. So here, for example, on that part, on that form on the side, I'm going to have the same orangey color as the lace. So here I will just pick the color and just changing the color to have something a bit more colorful. And right now my lace is a bit not enough colorful too, so I'm just going to pick the lace up again and I'm going to add a bit of color to the lace texture. Next, maybe let's work on the sole. So here at the bottom I know that I have some nice grainy material, so let's drag that one on the side. That one, actually, the mapping on my shoe is not perfect. Here on the side, it's pretty good, but here on the upper part of the sole, we can see that the material is stretched. So usually I will need to come back to my CAD software and edit the UV, but it's quite tedious and time consuming. So in Twinmotion, we have some tools to change the UVs. To do that, I will switch from object UV to probably spherical will work well in that case. When you switch that, you will need again to drag and drop the material onto your geometry. So I'm picking again the same material from the dock over here, and I'm going to drag that material on my sole again. And as you can see here, if I raise a bit the scale, as you can see, we don't have stretch anymore. Now we have a perfectly fine grainy plastic on the side. So just making it a bit, the grain a bit smaller. something like that. Now let's just keep adding more material. So here we have another plastic on the bottom part. That plastic, I want it to be a lighter gray, like that. Here also I'm going to go back to from object UV because I know that most of the other UV are perfectly fine. On that part of the shoe, I want to have a shiny plastic. So here I just dragged that plastic. As you can see, if I'm coming a bit closer, it's still pretty grainy and it's quite rough. So first thing I'm going to do is in the setting, remove the normal map, the bump. And here in the reflection tab, I'm just going to raise the reflection. Something like that is pretty cool. Now on the side of my shoe over here, I have that material. It's called Metal Flex. So if I come in the settings, here I have the metalness on, and actually it should be a plastic. So I'm just going to remove the metalness of that material. And as you can see, it works pretty cool for a plastic. So let's use that one. I'm going to apply it on other part like this one and maybe this one too. Now let's place some fabric on the side. Which one? Maybe this one? Something like that. I can use the same one also on that part. And maybe even on that part too. Actually, as you can see here, that one have a different styling, a different mapping. So for that, I'm going to drag and drop a second material from the library and set on him a different scaling. So probably 0.05 or a bit more. Something like that. Final touches. So here we can have some dark black plastic here. Same thing on that part and also on that part. Pretty pleased with the result right now. Also that upper part over here, I'm going to use also some fabric like that one. I'm going to have also a bit of color to it. So that starts to look great. If I'm coming closer, as you can see here, I can see through that part of my shoe. So for that, I'm going to use my material picker, click on that material, and in the setting, I'm going to turn on the two-sided so I don't see through anymore. Same thing for that other material, picking the material, setting two-sided. And also on that one. Start to look pretty good. Actually, the fabric on the side, I want something to be a bit darker, so I'm just going to pick the material, and I'm going to the color, and I'm just blending a color on top of it. And that's also really the power of Twinmotion. At that point, I don't really know the end result of the shoe I wanted to have. I'm just drag and dropping material as I'm doing this tutorial. And yeah, that's because it's super easy to use and we have all those simple options. So here, that fabric material, I've added that gray color to make that fabric a bit darker. I'm going to store that color in my color wheel. That way, when I'm picking that second fabric material, I can use the same gray color. So that's done for the texturing. Let's come back to my point of view. As you can see here, that thumbnail has been captured with that first set of material. I'm simply going to press the refresh button to recapture that image to memorize the new set of materials. Next thing I want to do is actually create a new variant of that object. For that, I'm going to simply select my object, my shoe in the scene graph. I'm going to copy it. I will click on the scene graph. I'm going to paste it over here. If I'm pasting that as an instance, that means that if I change some material on that second shoe, those changes will be also affected to the first one. And it's not what I want. I want to create a new variant of materials. So I'm going to copy that as a copy, not an instance. Next step is to create a new image. On that new image, I'm going to hide the first shoe and press refresh. And on the first image, as you can see here, that new shoe that I just duplicated is visible. So I'm going to hide that shoe and press refresh again to memorize the state visible or not visible of each object. So coming back to my image number 2, on that image I want to change a couple of material. For example, here on the side I want a completely new material that is not present in my library. So let's create a new material. For that I will select first my material picker and I will click on any material on my project to bring up the materials doc. From there I will click on that icon and here we have a new plus button that allow me to create a new material. If I click on it, here as you can see I have new material. The new material right now is affected to nothing, so if I'm doing some changes I won't be able to visualize them. So for that I'm going to first drag and drop that material onto one part of my shoe, like the side over here. So now if I'm changing something, like here if I'm changing the color, I can see the effect in my viewport and not on that small thumbnail over here. So on that new material, what I want to do is actually load a texture. For that I'm going to the more, here we have a texture control and I will load my own texture. So here I have a cool graffiti texture that will soon be shipped inside Twinmotion in a pack of musical instruments. But in the meantime, I can use it on that shoe. So here I simply loaded the diffuse texture and I can play with the scale to see it a bit better. Also, this should be a plastic, not a fabric. So what I'm going to do is just raise the reflection slider. I want that material on another part of my shoe, for example, like here. So I'm just going to simply drag and drop it there. Same thing on that part. Also, for that new shoe variant, I don't want that orangey color. So on the side here, I'm going to simply maybe drag and drop a new black plastic. And for the lace, I think I have, some black lace like that. As you can see here on the top, since I created this new material using that graffiti texture, it's a brand new material, and by default it doesn't come with the two-sided option turn on. So I'm going back to the option and turning that option on again to not see through that geometry. Final thing is for the brand over here, so same idea here, I'm just going to, for now, use that basic fabric on that part as well. Coming back to my media, now I have that first image containing my first shoe and that second image containing my second shoe. So now that I'm done with that, I can maybe create some new point of view based on those images. Actually, I just noticed that I didn't refresh the thumbnail of that new shoe, that new variant. So here I'm just simply clicking on refresh to memorize the new material set we just created. So now to create new images, I will simply start to navigate inside my scene. By the way, talking about navigation, let's click on the eye menu, and here we have the navigation bar that I'm going to show. Here you have all the basic shortcuts that will help you get you started in navigating inside Twinmotion. So here I'm using WASD to move around my object, and I'm using Q and E to move up and down. I can even use arc rotate and orbit or pan to move better near my object. So I don't need that right now, so I'm just going to hide it. Now moving closer to my object, let's make some close-up on it. For example, here we can have maybe one like that. To create that new image, I will click on the plus. So here basically I can create some pack shot of my shoe. And if I want to create the same point of view but with that second shoe, what I can do is select my image. If I click on the plus button, I'm basically duplicating that image. And now I need to simply switch my shoe through the scene graph, like that. So now I have each image with the two shoe variants. Same thing for that one, creating the new image, switching the visibility of the shoe, pressing refresh. I've even packed the image together by moving them around like that. So I have my first set of colors and my second set. The last thing I want to show in this tutorial is maybe another lighting scenario. So for that, I'm going to select my shoe, select the wall that is behind the shoe. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to right-click on my scene graph, paste it here. That I'm going to paste it as a copy because I'm going to modify the color of the background. Pressing OK. So here I just duplicated all of that. I will create a new image. On that new image, I'm going to hide my first shoe and my first backdrop, and I'm going to press refresh. So here, basically, I only have that new shoe, that new wall. That new shoe, I want it to be like floating in the air. So I'm just going to move the camera a bit back. Here, what I will do is using the gizmo here, you can switch, by the way, to different gizmo, the translate, rotate, or scale by opening this ribbon over here. And here what I want to do is simply rotate a bit my shoe so it's floating in the air like that. And maybe just turn it slightly so it's facing a bit the direction of the camera. Coming back to my camera, I'm just going to move the camera a bit up in the air to focus more on the shoe. Now that's done, on this second lighting scenario I want something a bit darker. First thing is to select the color of the background, and here I will use a gray color. Also, what I want to change is the HDRI, so I'm going to the more of that specific image, lighting, sky dome, and here instead of that one I'm going to use my second one, which is a bit darker. On that new lighting scenario, I also want to use a light. In Twinmotion, there is plenty of different type of lights. So you have omnidirectional, spotlight, neon, area, and a lot of different IES files. So here I'm just going to use the area light. For that, I will move the camera up in the air to make sure it's placed exactly on top of the shoe. And just moving it slightly up in the air, something like that. By default, the setting of that array light are not the one I want to use, so I'm going to customize that. For the length, I'm going to use 0.2. For the width, 0.4, so it matches roughly the shape of my shoe, like that. I'm going to turn the shadow on. Also, by the way, if you look around, you can see that the color created by that light is pretty yellow. So here I'm going to change that and make it something a bit whiter. 65 will be the perfect fit for that. And finally, let's turn on the path tracer. Here you can click on that icon to turn it on, but I'm also using R on my keyboard to switch it on. Right now, the intensity of my array light is not exactly what I want, so I'm just going to manually type a value just to raise a bit the intensity. Maybe a bit more. Something like that. Now coming back to my image, as you can see here we have a completely new lighting scenario. And how long did it take to create it? Just a couple of minutes. Finally, the last thing I want to change is actually the denoiser. Right now, as you can see here, when you enable the path tracer, it calculates, and at the end of the calculation, the denoiser will kick in and it will smooth a bit your image. But it's not what I want in that use case, because here on the side, I'm losing the grain of the fabric. So I'm going to turn the denoiser off. And also, probably what I would like to do when I will be willing to export that image is just raise the sample per pixel to something like 1024. Final thing I want to customize is probably also changing the aliasing filtering. I like to have the value as low as possible. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that tutorial. Hope you find that helpful. Thank you everyone for joining me for this tutorial, and I will see you guys for the next one. Bye everyone!